A young monk missed a boat. That was not unusual. People miss boats every day. What made it unusual was what happened next. The monk smiled, bowed politely, and said, "The next one will be better." The fisherman standing beside him looked confused. The next boat arrived an hour later. The monk missed that one too. Again he smiled. Again he bowed. Again he said, "The next one will be better." By the third missed boat, the fisherman was irritated. By the fourth, he was fascinated. By the fifth, he decided to ask, "Why do you keep missing them?" The monk looked surprised. "Missing them?" "Yes, the boats." The monk laughed. "I know." The fisherman stared. "You know?" "Of course." "Then why don't you get on one?" The monk looked out at the water, then answered, "I'm waiting for the right boat." The fisherman said nothing, because he had spent enough years around people to recognize a dangerous sentence when he heard one. The right boat. The fisherman nodded slowly and returned to work. Days passed. The monk continued waiting. Each day several boats arrived. Small boats, large boats, fast boats, slow boats, new boats, old boats. Every one of them was rejected. The monk always had a reason. Too crowded, too old, wrong direction, wrong timing, not comfortable enough, not safe enough, not ideal. The fisherman watched. At first he found it amusing, then he found it strange. Eventually he found it familiar, because he realized he knew many people doing exactly the same thing. Not with boats, with life. One man waiting to start a business. One woman waiting to leave an unhappy relationship. Another waiting to begin writing. Another waiting to travel. Another waiting to forgive. Another waiting to live. All waiting for the right conditions, the right timing, the right opportunity, the right moment. Weeks became months. The monk remained at the dock. One morning an old teacher arrived. The teacher had once instructed the monk years earlier. When he saw his former student sitting beside the water, he smiled. "Still waiting?" The monk smiled back. "For the right boat." The teacher sat beside him, and together they watched the water. Eventually the teacher pointed. A small boat was approaching. "Would you take that one?" "No." "Why?" "Too small." The teacher nodded. Another arrived. "Would you take that one?" "No." "Why?" "Too crowded." The teacher nodded again. This continued all afternoon. By sunset, dozens of boats had arrived. The monk rejected every one. Finally, the teacher stood. Then he asked a question. "What happens when the right boat arrives?" The monk smiled. "Then I'll know." The teacher looked at him carefully. "Will you?" The monk frowned. The teacher continued. "Or will you find a reason to reject that one too?" The monk opened his mouth, then closed it, because something uncomfortable had happened. For the first time, he wasn't certain. The teacher left, but the question stayed. Days passed. The monk found himself thinking about it constantly. Will I know? Or will I reject that one too? One afternoon, he watched a beautiful boat arrive. Strong, elegant, safe. Exactly the sort of boat he had imagined. For a moment, excitement rose inside him. Then another thought followed. What if a better one comes tomorrow? The realization hit him like cold water. The problem had never been the boats. The problem was his mind. No boat could ever be perfect because perfection always had competition. There was always the possibility of something slightly better, slightly safer, slightly more comfortable, slightly more ideal. The next day he returned to the dock and watched another boat arrive. Ordinary, nothing special. No obvious flaws, no obvious advantages. The fisherman was loading supplies. Passengers were climbing aboard. The monk felt the familiar urge to evaluate, to compare, to hesitate. Then he remembered the teacher's question, "Will you reject that one too?" For a long moment he sat still. Then he stood and stepped onto the boat. The fisherman nearly dropped a crate. "You're getting on?" The monk laughed. "Apparently." The boat left. The crossing was uncomfortable. The seats were hard. The weather changed. The food was poor. Nothing about the journey was ideal. And yet something remarkable happened. The boat moved. Hour by hour, the shoreline behind him grew smaller. The shoreline ahead grew larger. Progress, not perfect, but real. And for the first time in years, he understood something. Movement solves problems that waiting never can. Months later, the monk returned, older, wiser. The fisherman was still there. "How was the journey?" the fisherman asked. The monk smiled. "Messy, uncomfortable, unexpected, wonderful." The fisherman laughed. The monk sat beside him, then said, "You know the strange thing?" "What?" "I spent years waiting for the right boat, and the moment I finally boarded one, I stopped caring whether it was the right boat." The fisherman nodded. "Because movement changes the questions." "Exactly." The monk looked across the water, then continued. "When you're standing still, you obsess over choosing perfectly. When you're moving, you learn to adapt. One requires imagination, the other creates experience." Years later, the monk became a teacher himself. Students often came asking for certainty. "Should I take this opportunity? Should I start this project? Should I make this change? Should I take this risk?" The students wanted guarantees. The monk always gave the same answer. "There are very few right boats. There are mostly boats." The students rarely understood immediately, but eventually life taught them. Because life has a strange habit. It rewards motion more than perfection. The person who starts imperfectly often travels further than the person who waits perfectly. The person who begins awkwardly often learns more than the person who plans brilliantly. The person who boards an ordinary boat often reaches a destination while others remain on the dock. This story is not about boats. It is about the places in your life where you are waiting. Waiting for confidence, waiting for certainty, waiting for perfect timing, waiting until you feel ready. And perhaps those things will come, but perhaps they won't, because readiness is often created by movement, not before it. The monk spent years studying boats, years evaluating them, years comparing them, years imagining the perfect journey. Yet his life did not change until the moment he stepped aboard an imperfect one. Here is the question this story leaves with you. What dock are you sitting on right now? A dream? A project? A relationship? A decision? Something you've been thinking about for months or years? Something you've convinced yourself you will do eventually? When the conditions are right, when the timing improves, when the perfect boat arrives. Now ask yourself honestly, what if the perfect boat is not coming? What if the lesson is not to choose perfectly? What if the lesson is simply to begin? Because life moves, the water moves, time moves, the boats keep arriving. The only thing standing still might be you.